Pennsylvania Democratic Senate candidate John Fetterman is rebooting his in-person campaigning after resting for several months following a stroke in May. During a campaign event Friday night, the lieutenant governor offered more details about his recent health scares and defeating Republican Mehmet Oz in November.
3 months ago, I may not have made it, but now I'm standing right here in Erie. You are going to deliver for us in November, and that will deliver Pennsylvania for us, and I will deliver the 51st vote in the Senate.
CBS News reporter Sarah Ewall-Wice is with me now. You were covering this event, covering Pennsylvania's campaigns. Did John Fetterman give any explanation for why he waited so long to give this more candid assessment of his health?
You know, he did not explain why it took him so long to get into the details of his health. He gave an interview over the summer to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. That was a print interview. And then the day before the campaign rally that he had on Friday, he gave his first TV interview since having that stroke in May. And he did talk a little bit more in the TV interview about his health. He said his doctors believe he will get 100% back to normal and he'll fully recover. The other thing he did mention is he still has some audio issues. He still sometimes misses a word or mushes a few words together. That was what he said about his lingering side effects from the stroke. And they said that he would fully recover, and it's getting better and better every day. But, you know, there are questions about his health. He did have a serious stroke. They did put in a pacemaker. Now he's about to get back on the campaign trail for one of the most important races we will see in this midterm. Pennsylvania is a battleground state. It is a state that Democrats, of which Fetterman want to pick up for the Senate in a split Senate. So it'll be interesting to see how things move forward. But he seemed very happy to be back out on the trail. He seemed very energized to be back on the trail. And despite a few times where maybe he was missing a word here and there, it was very hard to see that he was having any troubles at the rally itself.
He's talking about his health issues, but what issues was he talking about, and what do the polls show?
You know, it's interesting. Despite being off the campaign trail for 3 months, he has been leading in the most recent polls, and some of them by quite a bit. One Fox News poll last month had him ahead of Oz by 11 points. And he's been doing a lot of campaigning online. He's been engaging with his supporters on social media. He had paid advertising. But, you know, one of the things that he really focused on is just being the everyday man. That is really the persona he is taking on, how he's trying to campaign here. Some of the issues he's specifically focusing on, as he's talked about at his rally, raising the minimum wage, being very pro-union. He talked specifically about Roe versus Wade, the protection of the right to an abortion. He also specifically talked about a few other things, but he kept his comments at the rally specifically on the issues very brief. He spoke mostly about his health. That's what he talked about at the top. He took aim and poked some fun at Dr. Oz, his opponent, but he kept really short on the issues specifically at this rally. But we'll see how this moves forward, what he has to say. He did also talk about, I will say, about abolishing the filibuster. That was one point he made at the rally as well.
Well, he has represented this progressive wing of the Democratic Party. How does he make inroads to moderates in a narrow margin state like Pennsylvania?
You know, I really think he is just trying to run an authentic campaign to who he is, what he supports. It doesn't seem like he's really trying to reach across the aisle so much as just say what he specifically stands for. And it's interesting. It seems like he could end up picking up support from across the aisle, or specifically from Republican voters. I was at this event in Erie. There was a long line to get into the event, and I was taken aback, actually, when I was approaching voters, and several people who were standing in that line to see John Fetterman speak were actually registered Republicans, they said, and they were there because they supported him and they were going to vote for him in November. And you know what? This is something that Democrats, they see him maybe as a progressive, but the Democrats only have 50 votes right now in the Senate. They need 51. And so I think that if Democrats can rally and get the enthusiasm they need, it won't be so much moderate versus centrist versus progressive. It'll be more, we need the Democrat in office moving forward for the party.
Let's talk about the Republican nominee, Mehmet Oz. How's his campaign schedule shaping up, and is he still pushing that Trump endorsement on the stump?
You know what? While Fetterman was off the trail, Oz was out and about campaigning across the state. He was in Erie, where Fetterman held his rally earlier in August. He also was in Harrisburg, that's central in the state. And then he also was on the eastern side of the state. And he's done multiple campaign stops across the state of Pennsylvania, as many as 10 counties. His campaign announced in just a matter of weeks. So he's really been going everywhere and trying to reach out to people. Something that is interesting to note is during the primary cycle, he really was touting the fact that he had the support of President Trump. It's noticeably absent from the campaign trail right now. Fetterman didn't mention President Trump on Friday. And, you know, if you look through some of the messaging from Dr. Oz, he hasn't come up. President Trump has not come up in his messaging more recently. Of course, there is the reality that when you're running for the primary, you want the endorsement of Trump. That could be a huge deal for you. But once you get to the general election, it might not be as helpful, especially in a state like Pennsylvania, where, yes, President Trump did win it in 2016, but then President Biden won it in 2020. It could be a challenge for him moving forward now that that state has actually gone blue in the last election cycle.
Just back from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Sarah Ewall-Wice. We thank you.
Thank you.